Welcome back to Hashing It Out. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Corey Petty. Today we have a little more interesting episode where we are going to talk to Rajeev from Secureum. I'll allow him to introduce himself in a moment, but also as a part of Secureum smart contract auditing bootcamp, he's recently finished up the first Epoch, and we wanted to bring on some of the top participants of Epoch 0 to talk about their experience and what they plan to do. So we also have Hadrian and David from the Epoch 0, potentially another one if he joins us midway through. But to start us off, do the normal thing, Rajeev, tell us about yourself and a little bit about Secureum.
Sure. Thanks, Corey, for having us here from Secureum. So I'm Rajeev, started Secureum. Well, Secureum has a bit of an interesting context, like with any project. It started roughly about a year ago, actually exactly about a year ago, as a newsletter, a weekend newsletter, while I was working with Corey at Status. And that evolved into the bootcamp that we're going to be talking about in this podcast. So as for myself, so I've been doing different aspects of security, software security, hardware security for a long time now. I've been working with blockchain, specifically Ethereum, for the last several years, and smart contract security made absolute sense. Just combining my language security background with Ethereum smart contracts. So that was how I got into smart contract security, and really got to dive deep into it during my stint with Trail of Bits, where I worked with Jocelyn to add a lot of support to the Slither tool, which is a static analysis tool for smart contracts and security. So that's how I got into smart contract security and Secureum. Like Corey said, we had a good Epoch 0 bootcamp last year, second half of last year, and which is what we'll be talking about. So thanks to David and Hadrian, and hopefully Bo, who will join. So we have a fun thing. We'll dive deeper, but yeah, that's me, and a lot of other things planned for security.
David, do you want to give us a quick introduction?
Sure. So my background, I'm a software engineer. I actually started in crypto less than a year ago, about last July when FCC happened in Paris. And I never worked in security, but I was always interested in security, like in the Web 2 space already. And coming into Web 3, I thought it was really interesting. And when I saw the opportunity that Rajeev talked about, like about the Secureum bootcamp, I jumped on it right away, and I loved it, actually. Yeah, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Hadrian?
Yeah, I've been in the crypto space way longer than David. It's been almost 5 years now. I joined during the end of my PhD in 2017, during the old ICO era. And there was a lot of demand back then, and it felt like a very interesting career choice to go into Solidity and Web3 development. And I had the perfect opportunity to do that. Many years later, now I'm a Solidity developer at OpenZeppelin, which is pretty well-known firm in the space, both for audits, but also for open source smart contract, which is what I work on. And like, when I saw the Secureum initiative for the bootcamp, it felt more like didn't feel like something I really needed in terms of career choices, but it was a very interesting challenge for me to pursue, hopefully learning additional things about Solidity. And I really enjoyed it, enjoyed the quiz. Obviously, I may have not taken it as seriously as other people because I was very much occupied by other activity, but it always felt very interesting. My Sundays were like, hey, this week I'm going to do the quiz and test myself. How good am I?
That's interesting. You come from two very different perspectives. I'm curious to see like your experience there. Rajeev, before we get into that, tell us about the process of creating the boot camp, because I know that you wanted to make it a level of difficulty that was higher than what I'm currently aware of today, to really make people spend a significant amount of time during a boot camp understanding the material. especially if they're coming in more fresh like David. Can you talk about the process of trying to make a curriculum like that that's you think is fair, but also accessible and gets people to the required threshold of knowledge to be dangerous in Solidity?
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that Secureum, the direction of the bootcamp, I mean, it was really an experiment to start with, right? And the origin, maybe sort of giving the context for that. The origin of, or really the motivation for the bootcamp sort of came about when Cody, when you and I were, mentoring the Gitcoin kernel security track, which was much broader. I mean, had fantastic people, and that's when I realized. I mean, I'd obviously worked on smart contract security as part of Slither, and then just seeing the different people from different contexts working on so many projects, everything really happening on Solidity back, at least back at that time. So it looked like there was a lot of need for not just Solidity expertise, but then coming in from a security background. Obviously, security is a huge aspect. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. It looked like everyone needed to learn, both the devs as well as the security, whoever wants to get into security auditing, or maybe just broadly security of smart contracts, right? So there was a huge need, both from a content and a structure perspective. We still have fantastic content from all the various audit firms, right? I mean, Open Zeppelin, TrailerBits, Diligence, Sigma Prime, what have you, right? So I mean, they've been sort of leading they've been the torch bearers in the space, right, in the smart contract security space. But what I saw was that we needed a more structured approach, and just curating all the content and making it accessible in a way, accessible as well as sort of being open to anyone, like David, who's still from a software background but probably new to security background, and maybe the more experienced people like Hadrian, who have spent a lot of time in crypto. So to keep everyone engaged, be welcoming to everyone. I mean, that was really my motivation. So that was sort of the motivation. And then somebody suggested, why not apply for a grant to the Ethereum Foundation. So I did. And then we also got 3 fantastic partners in TrailerBits, Diligence, Consensus Diligence, and Sigma Prime. All 3 auditing firms, all were very supportive. So we all came together, and that was really the origin. And in terms of the structure, was I can get into as many details as we want, but it was a 6-month effort, 3 months of really putting all the content together, and 3 months of the actual boot camp. So like you said, it was definitely a challenge trying to squeeze everything, right? We had everyone look at Ethereum for just 1 week, Solidity 101 for 1 week, then Solidity 201, a lot of the Open Zeppelin stuff, everything compressed in 1 week before we went into security. So we really needed all that. So yeah, I mean, that was how it went, and happy to dive into more details. I'll be curious to know how David and Hadrian, felt about really dealing with all that information in the 6 weeks, in the 8 weeks that they had.
Should I go? Should I say something?
Yeah.
Actually,
now's your chance to tell them if you sucked.
It was great, actually. No, it was very good. And there was so much information, and we could feel, like, we could see that you put so much work into it. So as I said, as a kind of beginner, I was a bit overwhelmed. Like, there was so much information, and on top of that, like, every time I was going one way and researching something, like, I would, of course, like, go down, like, keep finding new things to read and to look into, and like new things that I needed to understand. And so I never stopped. Like, all the learn phase, and on top of that, like, I didn't say it, actually, I'm working full time at on a protocol, like, that we launched a few months ago. So every free time that I had, I was working on the bootcamp, basically, on Secureum. But yeah, I learned so much stuff. It was amazing, and it's great to see that Adrian, who has so much experience, even took the bootcamp. And I'm sure, like, you'll confirm that or not, but I'm sure you learned some things too.
Yeah, my idea was very different because, I mean, there are a lot of learning materials for Solidity, and everybody is always asking me, where should I go? So I need to check what exists to know what I should advise. And at first, I was going to go into Secureum thinking like, hey, maybe I can just speedrun that, like just take the quiz without reading the material. And the truth is, like, there is a lot of material because it's both written text and YouTube videos. So depending on what people are more attracted to in terms of kinds of material, I'm sure they can find something that suits them. My way of approaching that, as I said, was on Monday I tried on Sunday I tried to speedrun that, and I give myself 1 hour to do these things that some people might have spent 10 or 20 hours just working on. So I was just like trying to read as fast as possible through the document and take the quiz. And my guess initially was that I would be able to take the quiz without even reading the material. And that was not true, because there were always like very, very interesting points and very fancy points that were very interesting, that for the event point of view. And when it moved into like Solidity, it showcased a lot of OpenZeppelin's code, so that I was very, very familiar with, obviously, but it also showcased other pieces of code that are not OpenZeppelin, and it was very insightful for me to see what other practices are in this space. And the end of the Secureum bootcamp was mostly about tooling. We talked about Slither, but all of those other tooling. And this was also very interesting for me to have this view, because now it's tooling that I try to include in my day-to-day operation. Like, we added support for automatic Slither tests in OpenZeppelin recently. It was not really related, but it happened really at the same time. So that was interesting. And the last thing that I want to say, what was very interesting is that, as Rajesh said, that it took them months to prepare the material and then publish that. And between the actual bootcamp and the preparation, like the protocol did change. Like, we had 1559 happening and things like that. So it was also very interesting, like, from someone that is actively following all this evolution of the protocol, to come in on the Discord and say, oh, by the way, these questions are assuming Ethereum like 2 months ago. And let's discuss what's changed since then. And it was very interesting discussions.
That is interesting to try. And this is something that I've people have always asked me, because I come from a background of academia, and so does Rajeev. And so throughout the years that I've been in here, people will say like, well, how do I do this at like a college level? Like, what courses do I take to learn Solidity development or smart contract development? And the answer is you don't, because it's changing so rapidly. I would say the best bootcamp that I'm aware of for combining the requisite knowledge to start saying you're proficient to these things is Secureum, and it's a bootcamp, and you just explain the concept of the underlying protocol changing during the process of the first one. So like, building evergreen material is very difficult in this industry, and it may take a while for that to happen. And even for like an experienced person as yourself coming in and saying you learned things, I think it's valuable. But I'm like, who's this program for, and who is it not for? Because I kind of want people, I always push people and say, where do I go to learn smart contract security? Because like you, Adrian, I've gone through way too many courses, and I speed run them to make sure, like, to understand the quality of them, and so that I can reasonably say, this is a good program, go do this, or this is where you come from, maybe you should try this one out. This is, maybe if you're into this type of material, this is a good one, or this is garbage, don't try that. And I only basically say Secureum at this point because it's the one that I know is going to keep up with the material, and it has the right people in it to be able to do that. Like, but it's hard. So who is it not for, I guess? And any of you can take that.
People who are not willing to spend the time and the energy working on that. It's hard. Like, you have to be dedicated. I would say it's like adding an additional topic to your master's degree. Like, you have maybe 5, 6, 7 courses, and this is the 8th one that you're going to do on top.
Yeah, I mean, it was for good or for bad, I think I wanted to take a breadth first approach because there's just so much to learn, right? I mean, if you who is it not for? I guess simple answer would be if you're not interested in Ethereum, if you're not interested in security, then it is not for you. Right? That's still a very wide net because I mean, Secureum is really security plus Ethereum, right? And is it going to evolve? Hopefully, yes. Is it going to catch up with everything with 1559, like Adrian said, with the upcoming merge? Solidity is changing so fast as we speak. Open Zeppelin is changing, right? I mean, their libraries are getting more and more, or maybe code is getting more optimal. So it's never going to be the same, right? So keeping up and staying evergreen, as you said, Cody, it's going to be hard. But in terms of who's it for, I guess from a Ethereum ethos perspective, I really wanted it to be breadth first, as in for people who are new to, I mean, we had, I think, some participants who weren't even from computer science, right? They were people who just were interested in the concept of security and how does it work, maybe from a program management perspective, maybe from a very different angle, right? So obviously, it's a much steeper learning curve for such people, but the intent was really to keep it open to them as well, and open not just from a difficulty of the content, but from keeping it, making it free and accessible to everyone. So that's what the EF grant and the sponsor partners enabled Secureum to do, was to keep it free. So anyone, I mean, all this content is out there. As we know, it has to be updated, but it's all open. People can look at it. And in the current version of the bootcamp, there is no fixed structure. So you don't really have to sign up to be part of the bootcamp because it's always running. So people can learn, they can join anytime. And by join, I mean just join the Discord. Secureum exists purely on the Discord. So they join in whenever they're ready to assess themselves, take a quiz, we're calling it races. They register, get a code, take the race. People who perform really well in the race are invited to care for different protocols or participate in other more advanced learning opportunities that we are doing with Certura or Spearbit or any of the other teams in the space. So that's, and then again, it's open to part-time people who are in this part-time nights and weekends, like David, people like Hadrian. I don't know how you I mean, Hadrian, I can understand, right? He's been looking at this for like 5 years. And I mean, he said he didn't really spend too much time, but nevertheless, he was in the top. And we should clarify that the people like Hadrian and David, they were the top 4 participants across, what was the number? I think
128. No, it was like it was more than that.
Yeah, so we started with 650 people, 1,000+ people registering, but 650 people took the first quiz, and then about 256 people finished all the 8 quizzes, 1 quiz every week. And out of those 256 people, Hadrian and David and 2 others, Bo and someone else, so they were in the top 4, right? So it's not just about how well they mastered the topics, how well they did those quizzes, but also their persistence and dedication. So kudos to you too.
Yeah, congrats to that, because I know it wasn't an easy feat. Even it may have been more easy for Hadrian, but I had heard quite a few people in different communities that I didn't talk about the difficulty of the quizzes and the amount of not realizing that it takes a lot of time to if you wanted to go through all the material to get through the material. And I think that's something a lot of people aren't necessarily accustomed to, especially when it's on, like the first Epoch Epoch 0 was on like a schedule every week. And so you were expected to get through all the materials in order to answer the quiz at the end of the week, which requires a number of hours. And that's something that a lot of people aren't accustomed to. Is like in my experience with previous courses, whether it be like Coursera or like MIT courses or whatever online, I can kind of run through it, all the material in like maybe an hour, and then take the quiz. Where this was like, no, you're going to go a little longer, which is more akin to, like you said, an addition to a master's course. And so, like, I found that interesting. David, what was your experience starting to learn the material from like software development and then adjusting yourself to the amount of time required to get the quizzes done appropriately?
Yeah, so actually, I think it was a good thing to have like those deadlines and this timing. If it wasn't for that, like if we didn't have to finish the quiz by next week, like it was every Sunday we had to take the quiz, I would have probably given up. Like I wouldn't have finished it. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think it was good. Like I had like a deadline in mind, like every week, and by Sunday I needed to finish all the material, make sure I understood it, and take the quiz. And I liked it. And to add on to what Rajeev was saying before, and actually what you were just saying now, like that you took some Coursera classes, and what's really good, I think, what really makes the Secureum bootcamp also more interesting, like on top of the material, and what makes it more interesting than just a regular Coursera class is also the Discord, like what you were saying, Rajeev, like the fact that it's fully open, like it's awesome. And you know that you have like a full community, like that can help you if you don't understand anything. Like if something that you don't understand, you can just go to the Discord and ask the question, and some people are going to answer you. Like the community on the Discord is really nice, actually.
That's
yeah,
outstanding.
I mean, we got a fantastic set of mentors. Corey is one of the mentors. We have Martin Holtzwende from Ethereum Foundation. We have Samson. We have really.
Yeah, I don't belong in the ranks of some of these people.
Well, I mean that's the I think that's the nice thing about Ethereum, right? I mean, we have people that this is really the permissionless open aspect that I love. I mean, people come in from so many different perspectives. I mean, Corey is, I think is. Not taking enough credit, but Corey has worked at Status. I mean, in different roles. You should check out. I mean, he was mentoring. Really started the kernel security track. I mean, he has a team of security team at Status, and comes in with maybe not as deep as some of the others in smart contract security. But I think that's the point, right? I mean, security as such, if you look back, has been around as much. Well, cryptography has been around for centuries, but if you look at computer security or software security, it's been around for like 40, 50 years, right? I mean, several decades ever since the mainframes. So that I don't think that aspect is much appreciated in the blockchain space, where we want to see everything from a very new set of eyes. But there's just some fundamental security principles that, I mean, if you look at access control, everything that we may talk about, admins and modifiers and governance and tokens and all that stuff, but fundamentally these are different terminologies and different primitives, right? That have their roots in basics of confidentiality, integrity, availability that have been around forever, right? So being able, so yeah, I mean that is, Corey definitely sees that part, and we have different sets of mentors, be it Samson, who looks at it from a very white hat perspective. I mean, the nuts and bolts of EVM, Solidity, protocols, and then we have many others as well. So I think that is really the community that that Secureum could become, and yeah.
Speaking of which, I mean, this is something that we talked about early on when you were forming the ideas of Secureum and the curriculum, for at least for Epoch 0, and was like something that Hadrian had mentioned. Like, this is incredibly broad, like, and you would wanted to go breadth first, but breadth first in Solidity smart contracts. And what you've alluded to is that the concept of security in Web3 is massively larger than just smart contracts themselves, whether it be like organizational security, like tooling. Yeah, sure, but we can talk about monitoring, which doesn't quite come into this. There's a lot of other aspects you could think about when discussing security in this ecosystem. And what you cover so far in Secureum is making sure people can be adept at handling Solidity smart contracts and the available tooling around gaining confidence and security of the code, right? And like how it compiles and goes down to EVM, but it's focused on smart contracts themselves. do you plan to stay there? And because that's you could. There's plenty of home to just stay there, develop it, and be successful forever. And the thought process of moving to a larger breadth, if you will, or having swim lanes dedicated to different types of security is a lot of work. What are your plans there?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I mean, there's a lot to be covered. Web3 in many ways is, you know, if you want to simplify it, right? We have smart contracts plus off-chain stuff, right? Plus all the other OPSEC, DevSecOps that maybe we inherit from the Web2 world. So all those are there, but I think for now, I mean, Secureum is really focused on security of Ethereum, and the biggest challenge is in smart contract security, right? I mean, yes, we do have it's all part of part of the puzzle, because smart contracts get broken not just because of bugs in the contracts, but because somebody lost their dev keys and somebody deployed a new contract with those keys, and boom, right? Millions of dollars lost. So in terms of focus, I think for now, the goal is going to be to first address smart contract security, not just from an auditing perspective, because I keep getting this question on the Discord or even DMs that, hey, I'm interested in security, but I don't want to become an auditor, right? So that was the focus of the Epoch Zero bootcamp, because auditors or the projects like OpenZeppelin or Diligence, Trailhead, Sigma Prime, they do many things, but then smart contract auditing is one of the big things that they do. So that is still very, very critical to this ecosystem. But in security, as we know, we have this concept of shift left, right? We don't want to push security to the auditors post-deployment or just before deployment. We want to move it to the developers, to the designers. So that, I think, is the goal, is ultimately to keep moving security in smart contracts on Ethereum. Today, all that is in Solidity. We keep moving it, we keep shifting it left. So getting more developers, right, and helping them improve the security jobs so that the quality of the code, the reliability, security of it the bar keeps raising, so that we don't become so dependent as a community towards this, build, audit, launch cycle, right? And where all the pressure is really on the auditors to make sure that there are no bugs, because that's really not possible, right? So the focus is, short answer is yes, off-chain, all the other aspects. I think we may get into monitoring and other things, but that may be on demand. I mean, if let's say OpenZeppelin or Forta or Tenderly, whoever else comes and says, hey, we want to, really work with the Secureum community, and we want to train them, and we want to maybe hire them and things like that, Secureum will be open to it. But then it's also limited by my bandwidth, right? I mean, Secureum today is really, I'm the sole organizer, which obviously doesn't scale when it comes to security. So I don't have very good answers on how that is going to scale. Will there be people? As of now, I'm looking to maybe get more volunteers, paid volunteers to help as Secureum tries to scale. So a lot of what gets addressed will depend on how Secureum can scale itself.
That's an interesting topic you bring up, is the concept of security auditor. When most people hear that, they think about these elite people that they rely on after they develop some smart contract and then have to get an audit before they launch for a myriad of marketing confidence purposes. And that's, like you mentioned, that's kind of the mentality that a lot of people have, is build, audit, release, and which puts a lot of the pressure of solving what I would consider low-hanging fruit on auditors, where, in my opinion, that's a waste of their time. So the concept of shift left is teaching developers that they can also be auditors themselves, and there's a tremendous amount of work that they can do. And so, I mean, David, you may represent one of these people, a smart contract developer working for a company building a protocol that now has a lot more tools in your tool belt to get code at a much better state when you're ready to go to an auditor? Can you explain like maybe how your mentality has shifted in the process of learning about these things and how it maybe changed your development process?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like things like after the Secureum bootcamp, I think I started like looking at things differently and like be more like look at all the pitfalls that we were learning like in the bootcamps, like things that I didn't see before. Like now I see them right away, and all the tools that are available to us. Like for example, like Rajeev was talking about Slather, and like all those tools that were made for securing your contracts, and that I didn't know about before or didn't know how to run. Like now I can just run them and like see where I made mistakes or where there could be a potential exploit. And this is the thing that is like my contracts are going to be way more secure when they get in the hands of the auditor, and the auditor can actually do their work, like more manual work, and actually look deeper into the contracts and try to find something that I didn't see. But like all those tools that are available to us, like every developer should use them.
Adrian, on your side, which is, I guess, a little more closer to the auditor side, I'm not exactly sure what you do at Open Zeppelin because y'all do so much. Like, you have standards building, you do auditing, there's monitoring, all within a single organization. Have you, like, how much does it make you happy that an effort like this is underway where developers come to the table with using standards appropriately and maybe understand what they're asking when they come to an auditor?
Well, I mean, in Open Zeppelin, we have this pretty strong separation between what we call the security team that is in charge of audit and the product team. Product team that does contract and defender. And now we have also Forta that you mentioned as a spin-off of Open Zeppelin that also deals with monitoring and security. So, I mean, I'm not in the shoes of the auditor, so I can't tell you for sure, but I'm pretty confident that they enjoy when the people that come to the audits have already done like the best they could to make sure the code is clear, to make sure that simple things are working. Like when you go, I mean, there is a guideline to how to prepare your code for an audit, and these guidelines might not be applied that often, and I'm sure Secureum is really like teaching people how to do that, possibly by putting them in the shoes of an auditor. But like, and audits are expensive. Like audits are super. If you want good auditors, it's super expensive. And the more you prepare the code, the more you will make sure that the auditors are actually checking stuff that is very critical, essential, that is not able to do by a tool. If the auditor spend time just making sure your code compiles and that Slitter runs, like it's engineer time that you're paying. So it's better for everybody.
I cannot stress that point enough. It's something I've been screaming from the mountaintops for quite a while now, is if you want to pay less on audits, do more on your side to prepare for an audit so that they're not wasting their time trying to find reentrancy bugs that Slither catches in 3 seconds. And by doing this work and going through a process like Secureum and like being able to understand these things, you're able to then get to a point where you can identify the right kinds of questions you should be asking an auditor in the first place, as opposed to, I built some stuff, can you audit it? Which is more often than not what people are coming to auditors for or with. And the auditor then has to spend a tremendous amount of very expensive engineering time just trying to figure out what they should be looking at, as opposed to saying, this is the scope of what I'm looking for. I want confidence in this particular thing. Can you check for this? And then that's done. So in the current state of smart contract security and people getting audits, there's long lines and it's very expensive. And if you would like to cut that line a little bit, coming to the table with something like that your auditor will thank you and you'll pay less money for it. And you'll get better work because they're spending more time doing the things that they're really good at. And I would say I don't know how to put this, like one of the largest weaknesses of the current ecosystem is the amount of talent in security for smart contracts. And the compared with the overwhelming demand for that work, right? That imbalance is really hard. And this is why I push something like Secureum so hard, is because it is at least a funnel for both developers and auditors to rise the tide of that relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the several points, right? One, what David mentioned, the goal is to get everyone who goes through the Secureum boot camps, right? Just familiar with not just with the tooling, not just with all the various libraries, the Solidity, all these concepts, but also the security mindset, right? We keep saying this. So hopefully, when David is writing his new V2 for his protocol, when he types out a line of Solidity code, there's probably a part of him that is looking at it from a security mindset and saying, oh, wait a minute, okay, this return value for this function, it returns something, but I'm not checking it. So that is a red flag, right? So that I think is part of shift left. So I think that tooling plus the mindset, I think that will help. Both people who want to build a career in security, auditing, whatever that is, as well as shifting it left towards the security mindset in the developers themselves. And the second key point that Corey you brought up is, and Hadrian as well, is to get the code as ready as possible before the audit, right? You guys, I think, covered all the points why that is critical. Long lines, more expensive. So if you're paying top dollars, you would rather have all the low-hanging fruits covered yourself, right? And let the Open Zeppelin team or Jocelyn's team at TrailorBits or Gonzalo's at Diligence really look deep. And a lot of the effort today, by the way, is also manual, right? So we have this tooling that is still a work in progress. Fantastic tooling from Certora, Diligence, TrailorBits, all around, right? But I think we're really early. So while we, make progress towards that, a lot of the bugs today, at least compared to 2 years ago, are in what is known as application logic, right? Which is out of scope for the tools because you can't generalize them. So Jocelyn or his team, Gonzalo's team or Mehdi's team, so they really have to spend the time to write the test, to manually analyze, and that is, we only have so many hours, right? Manual effort. So the other aspect that Secureum is strongly pushing on is this concept of audit readiness, or some people want to call it pre-audit, but that aspect of care, right? Comprehensive audit readiness evaluation is something that would hopefully help. That's again putting a structure to this concept of audit readiness, as opposed to letting David's team take care of all the security and then go for an audit. Maybe there is a stage in between where there is potentially a community effort within Secureum that can look at your protocol code before it goes for an audit, right? Be it 3 months or 6 months down the line, wherever it is ready, and essentially takes care of all the basic pitfalls and best practices that the Open Zeppelin team, all these other teams have come up with, right? We take care of all that so that Jocelyn's team or the Open Zeppelin team can actually spend the time running their tools and spending their manual analysis on things that matter. And like Corey, you said, not worry about the reentrancies that a slither can flag and be taken care of much ahead of time. So I think those are critical aspects.
I think that's a part of the program that needs to be clarified. Like, you have two phases of Secureum. One is a learn phase and one is a audit phase, where people who show promise with doing the quizzes of the learn phase and show that they understand the material well enough can enter into a second group that gets exposure to this care program. Can you explain that a little more? And after that, I'd love to hear like your experience with this process of learning and then being exposed to actual real code and finding real issues of a pre-audit or care, getting people ready to go to audit.
Sure. So I'll start by apologizing for the evolving terminology. I'll just talk about the So the terminology that we're using these days with the Secureum Bootcamp is there is a learn, there is a raise, and a care, right? So learn is really all the content with Secureum that was already prepared in the Epoch 0, as well as all the other content from all the other various teams, right? All this has to keep evolving and getting better. So that is going to be an ongoing process. So that is, that is going to happen. But coming to the next phase is the race phase. Race is just a readiness assessment for care. And care is a comprehensive audit readiness evaluation, right? Sort of a mouthful, but what it really says is that care is really where the rubber hits the road. It's really the practical aspect of what an auditor would do, what a reviewer, if you don't want to use the word audit, what a security reviewer would do, or what David or any other protocol developer themselves, their teams would do is write the code and then look at it and review it to see if there are any security issues, right? So that is really the care phase. That's the audit readiness phase before the project goes for the audit. And that is happening in the Secureum Bootcamp. And that obviously requires two things. It requires a real world project to come in. And this is where protocols that are ready to go for an audit can come in. And this is, again, it's a paid service with Secureum. So they come in and it's really lasts for a week. And they have their code frozen, ready for the audit, maybe almost ready. And they have the security, the Secureum community, right? Today it is about 16 people who have been selected. The top 16 participants from a race are selected for a care. So they come in and they review the protocol code. They, they publish all their findings, put it in a report. And what I do, what the Secureum representative does, is really take all the findings and note that, not everyone who's reviewing is, at a level that a David or a Hadrian is, right? So we have, all these are aspiring security experts or developers, right? So some of their findings may be valid, some of them may be invalid. So what Secureum does is, Secureum, in this case, it's me. So I review the code myself, I look at the findings, and then I sort of judge which is valid or not. And then I compile all the valid findings, and that becomes a care report that goes to the protocol, right? Which can work on those findings and fix them before they go for an audit. So the protocol hopefully is happy. The audit team that eventually ends up auditing that protocol hopefully is happy because all the basic things have been cleaned out. So now they can focus on the deeper application logic or economic attacks, what have you. And the Secureum participants get an opportunity to actually review code that potentially has bugs because it has not been audited, right? And it is a real world protocol that's obviously security minded, security conscious, because they are coming to Secureum. They're also community conscious. They want to work with the community, right? So they get to do this review and get whatever feedback possible from the protocol team itself. And all this happens on Discord, right? And a little bit of feedback from me as well. So they hopefully learn what it takes to review as an auditor or as a developer, right? So that is the care process. There are still details I can get into, but that is care, right? What's happening today. And this is obviously limited by the bandwidth, right? We can't have everyone, 128 people doing the review, because somebody has to review, somebody has to check their findings as well. So that is why we need to sort of limit or select the number of care participants, and that is where the race comes in, which today is still a smart contract security based quiz, but it can change forms. It can become a CPF or something else later. But participants in the race take this multiple choice quiz, and the top participants are invited to the care. So that's roughly the process. There are other sort of things that have been worked out, but yeah.
How's y'all been, as someone who's participated in this and obviously gotten to the top, what's been your experience of doing this and then getting exposure to real world code and projects that come in?
I think that care, the being able to feel like an auditor kind of was really interesting, and like looking at code, like, so basically you are given code from a real world protocol, as Rajeev was saying, and you don't know anything about it, and you have to review it. So just like like a regular auditor would. And one thing I think was really interesting is like you see how important the documentation is. Like that's something that's often overlooked by like a lot of developers. And so you're looking at the code and you can run all the tools and you can like check all the pitfalls, like the common pitfalls that Solidity has. But if you don't understand deeply the protocol, like you're not going to actually be able to test it and to find like really like a big exploit that could be in the code. So first thing you have to do is like dig in the documentation and like make sure you understand what the developers wanted to actually do. And so that's like the thing that like that I noticed, like documentation is so important, and like you just throw your code at an auditor sometimes and it's not commented well, and like they have no idea what they are looking at. So
the code comments itself, David, don't you know?
Yeah, it should.
He's shaking his head.
So
and being a smart contract developer myself, I mean, as far as I know, like auditing and developing are two very different jobs. Like it requires basically the same knowledge of the system, but the way your mind is shaped into either building secure code or auditing other people's code, that's completely different. But both have also these things that you really need to understand what you're doing and what the system is supposed to do. And just like auditors sometimes might end up with code that is poorly documented and they don't know what they are auditing, sometimes you also have people looking for smart contract developers that have an idea, but the idea is very rough, very vague, and they are just asking people to build a contract. And the same way you can't audit, you can't build a contract unless you really know what's the scope, what's the idea. So it's true that it's on the developer part to properly document the code, but sometimes it's also an issue of Web3 management project not taking the effort to document their protocol properly, like not even at a contract level, at a very high level of explaining what the objectives are, what the stories are for different users, what the workflows are.
Yeah, that's certainly something interesting that I think a lot of people don't. There's two things there that I want to point out. One is the required mind shift of going from developing a smart contract protocol to auditing a smart contract protocol. And two is the pitfalls you can fall into if you think that the code comments itself. Because an auditor, if say for instance, let's make this scenario, I go in for an audit or review, and I give them the code and say like the code comments itself, and let me know if it works. The auditor, I mean, depending upon how this is done, that reviewer can go through it and say, yeah, the contract does what I think it does. But in reality, the contract code does things that the developers didn't quite expect because they had one thing in mind of what this thing should do. It does those things, but it does a few other things that they don't want, right? But unless you provide the documentation and user stories and what you expect from this contract code, the reviewers can't tell you if it doesn't do that. And so they say, yeah, it does all the things you expect, but it also does this extra thing, which is against the things you're expecting or may cause issues with the things you're expecting. And you can only do that if you have a solid understanding of what the developers want to be happening, and then the code base they give you that they think does that, right? And that's something that can only be done by the developers themselves. And it really helps the auditors figure out like, what is it you think this does, so that I can give you a much better job of like what it actually does and whether or not those two things match up.
Absolutely. I mean, like Adrian was pointing out, right? I mean, this goes even beyond the developers, right? Because today, code may be comments, and there is a school of thought that believes that, I'm not going to read any of the comments, any of the documentation, because what's going to execute is the code, and the comment may be stale, may be outdated, may not even be there, right? So I'm just going to focus on the code. So that's one viewpoint, right? But if you look at software engineering, which is really where security comes from, and software engineering has been around ever since software was developed, we had to move significantly to the left, where we have requirements, where we have design, we have specification. And we are talking about documentation, right? Which is not even specification. And Corey, we have talked about this so many times. Specification is, what this is supposed to do, right? And documentation is what this does. And code comments, be it NatSpec, in Solidity, or be it, people are surprised, as David was alluding to, when you look at it from an auditor's perspective, right? And when you see that there is this protocol that just has a README file that is, fits in your screen, and maybe a few comments and zero NatSpec, right? So, right? That's what the auditors get, and the context from an auditor's perspective is also very critical. And this is something Jocelyn has brought up in his, and others in the Safe Cache shows, is auditors are obviously tremendously overworked at this point, right? They're jumping every week between different protocols. So they're going to get, as an example, let's say David's protocol, to audit for 2 weeks from Monday, and they're looking at it, right? So they have to know as much as David, and maybe 10 times more, to be able to break it and point out security issues, right? And in 2 weeks. And David's team, I'm not picking on you, David, just using this example, but David's team has been building this protocol for the last 6 months, right? So they know what the user experiences, the personas are, they're supposed to know. And Jocelyn's team is supposed to sort of reach David's team's level and, go to the bottom of the seabed in 1 or 2 days or 3 days, right? How is that possible if they're just supposed to look at the code, look at the contracts and everything else, right? So that, I think, is sort of beyond just, being audit ready. That's where I think projects like DeFi Safety and other things that Corey has also been part of, that's where they come in, is to look at, okay, does it have a spec, right? Does it have all the contracts listed? Does it have the dependencies? Does it have the actors? Does it have the trust model? Does it have a threat model? I think some of the top projects in this space, the very security conscious, very security minded projects have that. But it would probably be fair to say that, if you look at the whole sea of projects, right, most of them don't today. I don't know how Adrian, or David feel about that. And Corey, you've seen a lot of this as well.
I don't know. In your experience, do people have these things?
I think Adrian can talk a lot about this, no?
Well, some people definitely do, and some don't. And sometimes that's also the difference between a successful Web3 project and an unsuccessful one, is the ability to, as far as I know, for a project to be successful, it has to be perfectly executed from start to finish. And for it to happen, you need to have a vision that is clear, you need to have a documentation, you need to have everything that is fairly well thought out. And I'm not an auditor, but I would expect this big project that are building complex things in an effective way that it's visible during the audit phase. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just delusional about that.
Well, to bring it back to Secureum, I'm glad that we were able to highlight that for those who are interested in learning more about smart contract security and Web3 security, this program gives you exposure to not only the knowledge you need to understand how to think about smart contract developments, but depending upon which direction you'd like to go, it exposes you to how to think about this from a developer, how to prepare yourself into being an audit by giving yourself real world examples and work with teams. And it's a community of people from all reaches of of Web3 security to ask about. So to wrap up, how do people get involved and where can they go to learn more?
Secureum, like I said, just exists on the Discord. So hop on to the Discord. It's all open. There are many people who are active in different aspects of it. All the mentors, Cody included, they all have dedicated channels on it. And I mean, it's surprising, but a lot of them do take the time to actually respond. So if if you're just starting out, or if you have deep questions about any aspect of Open Zeppelin or Solidity or security in general, off-chain, any aspect, right? So you will find people there, hopefully, who will, who would have spent a lot more time looking and thinking about those things. So yeah, I mean, just hop onto the Discord. All the material for the learn is there, at least what was developed in Epoch 0. And I mean, I should say that a lot of it was actually, did come from Open Zeppelin. Some of their, all their libraries, contracts that they have out there are really well documented. So all of Solidity 201, if I remember, I think was just compiling. I mean, it made my task easier back then, was to really look at all the Open Zeppelin libraries and sort of compile all that stuff. Needs to, obviously there's a lot of room for improvement, but yeah, so hop on, take a look at the content, do contribute. There's nothing better than learning by doing. So if you are coming from a security background, then feel free to write your first smart contracts in Remix or any other hard hat or anything else. But if you're coming in from a Solidity perspective, look at, all the races, all the quizzes are published. All the Q&As are there on Discord. So from all the previous ones, so take a look at it. There are discuss channels where there are some people who are more active than others. They're happy to answer questions on Solidity, the security stuff. So do that, and then when you feel you're ready to actually take part in the quizzes, the races, there is a very simple registration. It's all free. So register, you get an access code, and every month, the plan is to have at least one race. So we just had one race in Feb. We had another one just got done in March. And we have, fantastic. So the question that I get is what happens after the quizzes, right? So like we said, cares are where really the practical experience happens. So there are multiple protocols coming in, but there are also other collaborative partners who are coming in, not necessarily protocols. So we have Spearbit, which is building an audit DAO. So they have come in, they're partnering on multiple Care X's. So Care X is just a customized version of Care that has some extra care. So Spearbit, whenever they want to audit a protocol, they bring their partner protocol to get a care done with the Secureum community. So that's one way to do it. We also had Sherlock just come in with the Capture the Flag, which was actually very interesting. So that's all there on the Discord. Then we have actually ongoing is a Certora CareX, where there was a workshop that happened with their prover technology. So that happened for about 2 weeks, and we have a care of the Badger DAO protocol going on. And then the 2 weeks after that, the 16 participants are going to be applying the prover tool on the Badger DAO protocol. Right. So all these participants are really learning a whole lot. They are, learning, and they're hopefully going to build a reputation in the space, be it a developer or a security auditor or a security person. And we are going to be distributing NFT badges that show what your race performance was or care performance was. All this will be on chain for to build your security or Secureum resume, if you will. And then then if you're planning to jump into a career in security, then all the collaborative partners, be it Spearbit, Sherlock, Certora, all the partners, everyone is hiring, right? So if you
yes, we are.
Our status, Open Zeppelin maybe. So yeah, all those things happening. But yeah, starting point is the Discord. The website is unfortunately outdated, But yeah, so hop onto the Discord.
Great. Hadrian, David, is there any shout outs or closing thoughts you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when that will be live, but as we discussed before the call, there is a lot of live events that are happening soon in the security space. I'm thinking of whatever is happening in Amsterdam, like there is a Trust Text event. Open Zeppelin Defender is having a hackathon. So, I mean, obviously, initiatives like Secureum are great, and they were particularly great during this pandemic crisis. But I also think that being part of the community also sometimes goes through attending live events, being able to discuss with security researchers, being able to discuss with developers, and listening about their latest finding, doing calls. So if anyone wants to see us in Amsterdam or at another event later on, feel free to give us a shout out, to say hello and to discuss security.
Absolutely. Well, at least 3 of us will be in Amsterdam. David, will you be there? Yeah, so all of us will be in Amsterdam this next month. And David, any final thoughts?
Just wanted to say thank you again to you, Curry, for having us, to Rajeev for Secureum, and of course also to Hadrian, because I use your work every day, so it's awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot. And actually, like, since we talked about like what I'm working on, like I didn't even say the name, so I might as well say it. So I work at Angle Protocol. It's a stablecoin protocol on Ethereum. So go check it out.
Awesome. Thank you. And see you next time, guys.
Thank you very much.